Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. I am so tired of men setting the standards for how we write. That's going to be my new intro for you. Okay, welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. I'm Kat Caldwell. I will explain myself in just a second, but this is episode 309 of Pencils and Lipstick. And it's late because I'm tired. Okay, life has hit hard. I've got 3 teenage girls. They're all very active. It's the end of the year. And, it is what it is. I have a book coming out. I have been gone for 5 weekends in a row with volleyball, and one of them was an author event. So volleyball tournaments and author events. And so on all of my hours on the road lately, I have been listening to some podcasts, writing podcasts mostly. And it's always good to continue to get advice from people, to continue to learn. But here's the thing that I just got a little bit annoyed with. When we listen to podcasts, and even when you're listening to Pencils and Lipstick and you're listening to the people that I'm interviewing, you have to keep in mind what point in their author career they are at and what they have going on in their lives. So I highly believe that men and women are different. And despite, society wanting to make this not be a thing, I think that both genders sort of fill a different role in society still. I think the majority of women take care of a lot of the house. They are usually taking a step back from their career once they have children. And usually the man is stepping up in his career. Not always the case, obviously. In fact, one mom at volleyball tournaments, she is like stepped up in career, and dad stayed home when they got deployed. Totally, obviously fine. Good for them. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter that there are outliers. Here's the thing. I keep looking at and listening to writing podcasts on productivity because life is hitting hard. And this always happens to me. Like if you've been listening for a while and you go back and listen to like springtime episodes, as summer comes, I'm trying to navigate how to be a mom, how to do all the things that we do for our family, how to do my editing for my clients and get my writing done. And this is a question that is just hard to answer. All right. So I have said this before, but the women who read Stephen King's On Writing, usually my friends come to me and like in a panic about how they're doing all their writing wrong and they don't know how, to follow his advice, and they're like hyperventilating. And this happened like to me again yesterday as I was listening to a well-known male writer and, just sort of like listening to his day to day, how he's gotten so many books done. And here I will say, men, if you are listening, don't get so offended, but just understand something. Like, obviously he has something to say because this writer has written like over 200 books. So clearly he knows how to write a book, and he knows how to write it quickly, and he knows how to set his own standards, right? Like how to get it done. But usually the men, like it's very rare to listen to an interview or read a book written by a man that isn't like, I get up at 5 a.m. and start writing, and then by noon, I'm done. Okay, here's the thing with women. My mornings, many times, at least once a week, if not more, is either taking somebody to the dentist or to physical therapy or picking something up for the house or taking the dog in, like all the little things that have to happen in our lives for the family to keep going fall on me, because that's how it should be. Because I am at the house, we move a lot, and so I'm always working from home. Like that has always been my job, whether it's translation or editing or writing, whatever it is, freelance writing, writing my books. I'm always at the house, but it means that the house stuff is kind of like co job. So, and that's fine. I like it like that, but it makes it very difficult to follow the advice from male writers. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So if you're a female writer out there and you're trying to follow productivity advice or follow these things, and you're finding it like coming up against all of your like real life scheduling issues, you are not alone. And if you are a man that happens to, have to do the co-working, like all the like house stuff, or your job is very demanding and you find it also like impossible to follow these productivity advice or like schedule your writing, how to schedule it and all that, it's okay. This is my main point today. It is okay. I think one of the best pieces of advice for writing time comes from Sarah Cannon at her company Heart Breathings. She has like a whole course, and she has like a planner that she does. I'm not great at planners. Like honestly, I do like these. These come from Australia. So the Fast Brain Friend. I like these because they're smaller and I can put them everywhere, but I'm not great at planners. But Sarah Cannon has, I think, the best way to navigate your schedule, especially if you have a constantly changing schedule. And that is to literally write out. You should look up her YouTube videos. I'll link it below. To write out by half hour increments what your days look like, and then fill in like every half hour that is constantly taken up like in your life, and you will be amazed at how very little time you have left for writing. And I think that's important for our brains, because you might be telling yourself, oh, I get home at 6. We'll just eat dinner real quick and then I'll sit down and write. And the more you look at your schedule, the more you realize, okay, by the time we're done with dinner, we got to do bath time, if your kids are little, or like I got to take my kids to volleyball, or I have to pick them up, or, all these little things start getting put in there, and you start realizing how very little time you have, which means in the time that you have to be very committed and disciplined. So I will link that in the show notes below. I think it is always necessary to face the reality of your schedule again. And I think we should do this every quarter, because every quarter is different. Weirdly enough, the last quarter of the year, I am usually fairly productive because everyone's like settled into their routine at that point, right? So like third quarter of the year, we're getting back into school. And a lot of times my productivity will go up. Springtime, it's fine, and then it starts declining, and summer is really difficult. So I think it's good to reevaluate that every year. It is also good to listen to how other writers who are much farther along than you figure out their day, but also to keep in mind the realities of the differences in your lives. Now, one thing that we can learn that men tend to be better at, let's just say, is focusing and being harsher about your deadlines. I think women have a gift of multitasking, but it's also a curse because when we're not multitasking, I think that we feel like we're not being productive. And writing is not a multitasking activity. You need to just write. You should not have your phone near you. You should not be doing research. You should not be doing anything. In fact, like if you need a name, just write XXXXX in the blank and keep going. Staying focused for a good, like 40-minute, 1 hour sprint of trying to write is something that men tend to be better at. Not always, obviously. I know everyone in America has to argue with everything, but let's just, come on average. Okay. So, yes, we can learn women to put our phones away. Stop scrolling. In fact, your like TikTok and Instagram breaks are not helping your writing at all. They are not actually giving your brain a break. If you need a break, which I highly recommend that you do after a 40-minute to 60-minute sprint, get up, walk around, take the dog out, play with your cat, listen to a song, but do not get on your social media. Now, easier said than done, for sure. I think sometimes if you have an addiction that's pretty hard, like an addiction to your phone, getting those productivity apps is probably a worthwhile investment. Just being honest with yourself, right? Because we do want to get our writing done. So being realistic about how much time you have is, I think, number one. Number two, focusing. You have to focus. 1 hour a day, if you write for 1 hour a day focused, you are going to see some good results. Okay. Now, I have said this before with the 2,000 to 10,000. I'm looking for the book now, and of course, I don't have it near me. I will also put that link in the show notes. It's a very thin book, but it has some really great advice. And I think the number one piece of advice in that book is to kind of write out, just take 5 to 10 minutes to write out what you are going to write about that day for your 1 hour, whatever you decide. And it is amazing how much it like solidifies in your brain what's about to happen and you write. I think another thing that you have to learn, both men and women, is to not edit. And I have to do this over and over and over again. Like seriously, telling myself to stop editing instead of just writing. Again, possible multitasking, and that small quiet voice in the back of your head that's like, oh, but if you edit while writing, maybe it will be perfect when it comes out. It never is. So I do know some writers who do this. I think they're very far along in their career. I think they also do not have very chaotic lives at this point in their life. And so they can sort of take, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours to write. And so I'm really talking to people who are very busy, have a bit of a chaotic life, and are aiming at least 1 to 2 hours a day of writing. And that's about it. I highly recommend the book. I think it's 2,000 to 10,000. I will link it in the show notes below. And I think that is also a book I was thinking yesterday to reread every few months, just to like humble yourself and like bring some clarity to your brain on what you can and cannot get done. So there's that. I have been toying with the idea of trying I don't know what people would call it, but the writing method of writing like doing your writing, and then the next day editing that writing, and then doing more writing. I haven't started that yet, but I've been toying with that idea because I wonder if it would help me go faster, in the sense of like keeping the story in my head and catching things before I'm too deep into the book. I don't know. The other thing I want to add to this is sometimes it's okay for your book to take longer than you expected it to. Now, on one hand, we need deadlines, okay? But when we are newer writers, like again, listening to somebody who has written 200 books yesterday in the car, and I was starting to feel down on myself. I was thinking, I was trying to navigate that emotion and that overwhelm that I was feeling. And while I took some good things away from it, like he's one that does the writing method of like writing and then the next day editing and writing. So I'm thinking about that. But we also, when we're newer to writing, like I have not written 200 books. I haven't even written 200 short stories. I don't think. I mean, I've written a lot of short stories, but I doubt it goes to up to 200, probably over 100. But, anyway, that's a lot, right? So when we're newer, and I'm coming out with my 7th full length novel. I have 3 other novellas on top of that. So, plus short stories. And I still consider myself, compared to this guy, newer. We have to realize that while deadlines are good for us, sometimes the story needs more time. Okay. And I would prefer that writers be okay with the time it takes for a story to marinate than to quickly get a story out that you then pick up and read and you feel like, this almost hit it. Like they almost got it. I'm sure you've read a book lately where you get it and it's just like, if this writer had taken 3 more months, I think that they could have developed the plot to be just that much richer and better. And I don't want you guys to put out books like that. I want you guys to be very proud of the product that you've done. The goal is not necessarily to get it out as quickly as possible. Like the goal is still to write quicker, always, like getting better at that, because we also don't want to take 5 years to get our next book out. But it's not necessarily to write so quickly that once the book comes out, you wake up 3 months later going, oh, that would have been a better idea. Like, okay, so hold those 2 things in your head. Like deadlines, yes, but marinating, yes, also. So that also comes into finishing that first draft-ish. And I mean, we call it the first draft, but who actually writes just a first draft without, so that like one where you're like, okay, I'm done with this now. This is the end-ish. It hasn't been like edited in a one sitting thing, but it's not yet ready to, please don't send it to the editor yet, guys. Okay. I'm talking at the point of like, even though you've kind of edited it while you're writing, once you hit the end, you should go back and reread the story. And this is where that advice of like, let it sit in the drawer for a couple months. I don't know if it needs a couple months, but it definitely needs a week or 2. And then you need to print it out and you need to read it and edit it again. Before it goes to the editor, you will save money. Please do that. So like that story needs to marinate in your head. You can give yourself a few months. That's fine. But also have like that goal, right? I don't think that it's good for us to have a half-written manuscript marinating all the time. I would prefer that you toss it and start over. I know some of you might hate me for this, but I'll give you an example. I toss bended Loyalty the first time around, and it's so much better than it was, because when you're trying to fix a half-written manuscript, you get hung up on like what should stay and what should go. We just do, because we're stingy with throwing out. We want to keep it as writers, like, oh, I wrote those words and they're precious and I need to keep them. No, you don't. Toss it. And when I say toss it, I mean like put it on a folder on your computer and don't look at it and start a new document. It's not as hard as you think it is. I'm about to do it again with Stepping Across the Thames, because I had started it in the moment of like Lionel coming back to England, which coincides with like Philip's story in Stepping Across the English Channel. And so then I got kind of hung up with the timeline and like things that were happening. And I needed it to get there, but I kept feeling like confined by the timeline of Philip's story. And so this weekend, I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to start it there. Who cares? Like, I'm just not going to do it. So I'm going to have a prologue, where he kind of comes back and whatever, have an idea. And then it's going to start like halfway through Stepping Across the English Channel, because I can, because I'm the writer, and because it'll make the story so much better and it'll be better. So I actually have to toss like a lot of words. But I've just done it too many times to feel upset about it. I now know that it will be better. I just have, past proof of that. Yes, I wish that I didn't have to, but anyway, that's how it is. So now what I'm grappling with is the deadline of that, redoing it, right? But I know that I'm going to write it faster now that I've sort of been able to throw that past manuscript away. So that's where like the marinating comes in, because I started Lionel and Claire's last summer. In fact, the prequel to Lionel and Claire is done and has been done. I haven't marketed it yet because I'm getting Next Love out. Which, by the way, Next Love is out on Friday, May 8th. You should go get it because I love that book. I wrote it and I still love that book, and it like lives in my head, and I think that you'll love it too. So links in the show notes. So it's better that this book marinated than I just pushed through and got it out just because I feel like I need to get it out because you're quote unquote waiting for it. I don't know how many of you actually are waiting for it. I'm sure that it will do well because I have a whole like a email list of historical romance readers, and they're, quote unquote waiting for it. But I'm sure that they would also prefer a book that's entertaining and fun and faster paced than one that's quicker out. At least I hope so. So this is a bit of an odd episode, but I want to encourage you as you go into graduation season and school ending season and picnic season, and everyone wants your attention to go to flying kite season. And you have to reevaluate what is going to work going forward. Don't panic. And I say this to myself as well. Sit down and think about what you actually have going on. I highly recommend that you pull out the full calendar of May, June, July, and August. Block out the days that you're on vacation, block out the days that people are coming to visit you, block out the days of graduations, and block out the days of parties, and block out the days of all the things, right? Because those are days that you are probably not going to get to write. And if you do get to write, count it as a bonus. Okay. But be honest with yourself on what is actually possible. Then be honest with yourself on what point of the day can you actually get your writing done. Now, I do love the idea of doing it right away in the morning, but it's not always possible. Even when the kids aren't in school. It depends on what age your kids are, but if they need breakfast made for them, I mean, if you're good at waking up early, whatever it is for you, you really have to think about like what is possible. And then you have to think of like what you prefer versus what is realistic. And so one thing I did appreciate about this podcast from yesterday was that he said he prefers morning time, but when the kids were little, he a lot of times had to be honest and realistic and write at night. So being realistic about your place, like moment in life, is extremely important to your mental health. Okay. Because the overwhelm is just going to mess up the creativity. Be also kind with yourself on you shouldn't sit and write for 5 hours. You really shouldn't. Like, that's bad for your body. It's not great for your brain. And you're most likely not there as a trained author. You're probably wasting a lot of time in those 5 hours, just sort of staring at the blank page or, quite frankly, scrolling. Because you being on Facebook on the actual computer is the same thing as scrolling on your phone. All right. Um, Also be realistic about, if you're like me and you have a couple books out, you still have to be doing the promoting and the social media and the newsletters and all that. And that takes time. It takes more time than we wish it would. If you're like me and you're not at the place where you can pay people to do that, it's going to take time. It might be the time to actually pay people to do that. I don't know. But please, as we go into the summer, be honest with yourself on what you can and cannot do. Check out Sarah Cannon's video. I'm going to link it in the show notes below. Check out my book too, Next Love. Out May 8th. I'm so excited. And just be kind to yourself. And if you do want to write faster, check out the book 2000 to 10,000. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the author's name, but I will have it in the show notes below. I'm sorry that this was late, but life is kind of cray now, and we just have to be honest with myself. But we are going to have, we have some great interviews coming up, and we also have Craft and Connect coming up. We're going to keep talking about ideal readers, so be sure to keep listening to Pencils and Lipstick. See you next week.